Hi, and welcome to MentorCore. If you're new here, we're a community focused on helping people in the security, risk, and compliance fields grow their careers and leadership skills through mentoring. You can find more information about MentorCore at mentorcore.biz. I'm Dan Ayala, along with Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. Now, on to this week's discussion.
Welcome back to another MentorCore podcast. We are excited to be here today with Katie Hananan. I first met Katie through Clubhouse, where we are co-moderators of a group called the Fireside Chat, which is really focused on talking about talent in the information security and related professions. And I have to say, I am totally fangirling here because I absolutely adore Katie. So before I go into what I think is so wonderful about Katie, welcome to the show. And also tell us a little bit about you and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, so much. I've mentioned my story before. It's aid worker turned cybersecurity professional, and it's like, how did that happen? And for me, it actually is all very much tied together. Working with Afghan refugees in Pakistan in the late 1990s, before I went to college, made me then major in military history. I was very, very interested in being a diplomat. I was going to go into international law. Had a whole plan for my life, as all people do when they're 18 years old and full of ideas. And that's the other thing that, I even tell my own children. By the way, I have 3 children. They're 20, 17, and 9. I'm often talking to, them and their friends about, what their plans are for their life. And I think it's reassuring to them to know that the plan that I had when I was their age was completely blown up, but I guess it turned out okay when they look at, the life that I've created and the career that I've created. And when I say I should say, again, in line with the theme of this podcast is that, I had a ton of mentorship along the way. But when I came back, I majored in military history for that reason, wanting to go into that field. But what happened was I, like most people, got done with my undergraduate degree, thought, well, maybe I'll take a year or 2 off before I go to law school, get some money, make it a little bit easier on myself as, I go into that period of my life. And what happened was I literally interviewed everywhere for a sales job. I thought I can do that. I used to work in restaurants. I can sell stuff, right? I ended up the only people who would hire me was CDW. CDW is a large, kind of value added reseller. At the time, they were not as big as they are now, but they happened to have a Department of Defense division that they had just started. That was 2004. So they thought, oh, military history, and oh, you've lived in that area. That might be interesting, I guess we'll put you on the DoD team, so that's where I ended up working in, IT sales. All of a sudden, I knew nothing about anything IT related. I'm a musician as well, by the way. In my spare time, there was no part of me that knew anything about anything IT related. But working with the military, I had to learn very, very fast in terms of, especially at that time in 2004, and leaning into supporting the mission, supporting the warfighter meant that a big chunk of that is, how does the warfighter in a forward operating position communicate securely back? So I had to figure out how that worked, what that meant. I had to align myself with partnerships with large companies like Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and the large system integrators, and be able to supply them with the materials and integration that they needed at a commercial off-the-shelf level. So when I say I was working with satellite communications, does that mean that Katie Hananan, was designing satellite communications programs? When I was 25 years old? Absolutely not. What I was doing was working in support of that broader mission. And that's what made me think, this is fascinating. I never really thought about how somebody would have to do that, even from a video telecom scenario where you're Air Force One, working for a company at the next company I went to after CDW, where we had a contract with the White House Communications Office, where we had 2 people on Air Force One, and I, running the secure telecom. all of that was fascinating. And I thought, I can do this. I can do this. And I was continually the only woman at the table during that period of my career, particularly in the military, from the integrator side. But what I loved seeing is at that time, there were a number of female leaders within the military that were at the table as well. And that made me think, okay, it's what what you see is what you think you can become. You sit at the table with a colonel, a female who is running a $3 billion program for the military, and you think to yourself, wow. Okay. I mean, that's something that, and we're having a conversation and I'm holding my own. How did I get here? I had those moments all throughout my career. And in working with the military, I think that was the first time I thought I'm going to stay in this forever because there is a broader mission here. And I loved being a part of that. So that's why when I talk about the aid worker to cybersecurity journey, it's a theme that I hear from a lot of my peers as well, that there's still just this desire innately in us in the cybersecurity industry to want to do the right thing, want to make things better for the broader world. And as I moved through the startup community and I moved through my career working with large enterprises, why I geek out on email all the time and some of my other clubhouse rooms when we talk more strategically about cybersecurity hygiene is because email is the way we communicate with each other. That's the way that companies communicate with me as a consumer. That's the way businesses do business. There are, if you can fix something like that, it helps an individual human being, whether that's someone's mom or whether that's, a large healthcare organization who's communicating with their clients and they need to trust that email coming through. That drives me. And that makes me feel fulfilled in this industry. And along the way that I picked all of those things up and from amazing mentors that, maybe founded that email security company or provided me the opportunities to be able to really lean into those types of roles.
That's
great. A little rambly, perhaps. But.
No, it's wonderful, and it actually sparked a question around. There's a lot of we live in two worlds. One out of one or two sides of our mouth. On one side, we say we don't have enough talent in the information security space, and the other side, we say we find all the reasons not to hire people. And so you've made. This is actually something I keep hearing. People who are in sales, especially that are doing things related to security and sales, want to make the leap over to practitioner. And there seem to be walls that come up between people when trying to make that leap. We see all these kind of silos. Same thing going into higher ed, leaving higher ed. I want to be an architect, or I want to go do infrastructure and applications. You can't make these jumps. But that's one that I hear a lot more and more people who have gotten to know and love the field through sales roles, through SE support roles, but want to make the leap into in-house practitioner. How did that go? And I guess thoughts and advice for people that are thinking about making that kind of leap and how to approach it with success in mind.
Yeah, well, one of my mentors told me once, get comfortable being uncomfortable. That was something I had to do. Even leaving the DoD space after 8 years was a big leap. I understood that if I don't leave now, I will be in the DoD space forever because it's such a specialized field. I'll probably be in sales forever. And I wanted more hands-on practitioner type experience. So it is just being comfortable, being uncomfortable. It was incredibly difficult to say, I give up all of the people that I know, all of the partnerships that I have, because I don't know if you know a lot about the sales side, but the way it was then, the way it is now is that a lot of those relationships that you have with the Ciscos of the world or the, CrowdStrikes of the world are on the one-to-one basis in the field. So that would be the Department of Defense, person that I would have been working with at Cisco. Still in touch with all those people, by the way, but we don't work together anymore because they're so siloed within these large organizations in the cybersecurity space. So that I have to say, a girl who moves to Pakistan by herself at 17 usually is someone who has a little bit of gumption as well. So I did have to really plow my way into some of those things. I really do believe in you just start doing the job and eventually someone will give it to you kind of situation. Because so when I was working for an email security company, I talk about that one a lot because I did have a ton of mentorship there. Patrick Peterson was the CEO and founder of that company. He truly gave me a seat at the table with some of the industry leaders in our space. And it was, what an amazing experience to have that kind of mentorship. But when I was in a company like that, that's in a high capacity, high speed growth mode, it was so close to R&D for the first time. I remember going into the office and, being I was in sales again at that time. So the sales rep from Chicago comes in, and I was running like the middle of the country, 18 states or something. I was always on an airplane, the puddle jumpers. I was in Minnesota a lot, actually, Elizabeth. It's too bad that I don't still have that job.
Those are the people who get diamond platinum, and I applaud because you made it the hard way.
Well, from segments, not from miles, because
exactly. Exactly.
It was just these little segments. and I would always kind of think to myself on a hard day, if I'm like getting on a plane in Akron, no offense to anyone from Akron, but your planes are small that fly to Chicago. I would pretend I was flying private because you walk out onto the tarmac and it's a little plane. I'm just like, flying.
DAK is a little airport.
Thank goodness you have a good imagination. I mean, I can imagine what some of my daughters like putting on their little tiaras and getting on the plane saying, it's all mine.
TSA at Akron Canton is your own personal escort.
Oh, it is. There's like 5 people just standing there helping you get through. It feels very concierge, like they must have to have so many people because it really did feel like a concierge moment. But while I was doing the puddle jumper stage of my career, I was that much closer. And what I was starting to say is going out to the corporate office and saying to the interns like, oh yeah, you're Katie Hanahan. Wow. So great to meet you. And I'm like, hey, young intern, where do you go to school? He's like, oh, I'm finishing my PhD at Stanford. Thinking like, what, how is it that I ended up, and by the way, I went to a wonderful school, but it wasn't Stanford. And so for me to, I was actually past him already in his career at that point where he was looking up to me and asking me questions about how the product was working in the field. And I had something to say to this incredibly intelligent intern at my company. But being that close to the R&D is what started the process for me to be able to really understand, because I love puzzles. I wanted to understand, how does this work then? What is the broader story? What is DNS? What does that mean? What does that mean, beyond the email story? What does an email, architecture look like as it relates to a Microsoft environment? Well, then what are the other security tools that'll be used in that same environment? So I had to understand, and I didn't necessarily have to understand every aspect of the cybersecurity space at that time, but I wanted to, because I wanted, when I was working with global CISOs, to be able to let them know in priority why this mattered, and why it should be in the stack of 100 projects or things that they wanted to accomplish for their company and their business objectives from a cybersecurity perspective in a year. I wanted to be able to tell a very good story about why this makes a lot of sense to do this. And I couldn't have done that if I didn't really, really understand the entire space from a practitioner perspective. So I go slowly at that time, not even realizing it, kind of doing the job of like what a lot of people call like a solutions architect or one of the security architects at a global company, because I would make sure that they know exactly where this fit into their overall objectives for the company from a cybersecurity perspective. So that's how it started. But yeah, I would encourage, you're not wrong. The walls are very thick between the sales, marketing, and practitioner side. And if somebody wants to do it, they just have to start doing it. And in demonstrating the value that you're bringing to, a global CISO, well, eventually then, your bosses and your peers, and when I say peers, I say anyone in the cybersecurity industry, start noticing that as well. Another thing that I did was volunteer as much as I could for organizations where I would be able to be a peer to the practitioners and really learn by sitting next to them. So one of the things I did was I started volunteering with the CISO of the Year program in Chicago.
Great program.
Have you been to some of those?
Sure. Oh, coming from Chicago, I know the program well, and Wayne and the people that put it all together. Yeah. No, it's a wonderful program, and unlike unlike any other CISO of the Year program I've seen around the country.
It's very unique to Chicago for sure. And you understand too, that once you're a part of that community, you have a seat at the table. I wasn't looked at differently because I, was technically working for, an email security company or something at the time, or an incident response company. There was still a peer-to-peer perspective, and that happened over time. And the ability to just, and just want to be able to, do your best and contribute back to the broader community. But outside of that, though, I mean, that's unique. I think for people listening to this program, ISSA, ISACA, broader organizations, even the Orbi community, the CIO community, another great place to be able to volunteer or sponsor or do something where you're sitting there. But the biggest one for me was the ISACs, having the ability to attend as an attendee, the financial services ISAC and the healthcare ISAC and the aviation ISAC, were for me critical. Because while all my peers that were still in sales were drinking late at night and then sleeping through half the morning, maybe. No, I don't know if that happened or not, actually. I have no idea if that happened. That's bad. But point is, I would go attend the sessions and sit next to, the CISO for a pharmaceutical company or the CISO from a major airline and ask them questions after the briefing and say, how did that resonate with you? What are you going to take back to your organization? Is this something that, you talk about with your team, even from a leadership perspective? Mm-hmm. Is this how you would lead your team, in these industries? And again, slowly getting through and crashing through that wall that does exist within the industry. And I just say the tenacity and just the ability to, be uncomfortable, because it is, there is a moment where someone says, what are you doing here? Do you belong here? Yes, I do. I do belong here. And I still say anyone who's still in sales, you do belong in the conversation, because you're bringing something very important to an organization. So if somebody is derogatory toward someone who's in a sales role, if they're good at it, they understand what that means to the company. And that's valuable to me as a CISO now, when I'm able to go back and go to a really good salesperson who understands our industry. That's incredibly valuable. And I want to make sure that people, continue to take the advice from those folks who are spending time doing that and not look down on them just because they happen to have a sales role.
Well, I really appreciate that insight. As somebody who came up, one part of the problem in that I came up through information security from infrastructure, 27 years inside the walls. And so having that perspective of how people continue to break through helps me be a better hiring manager too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was the thing too. When I sat down with Pat Peterson, I flew out on a Friday or Thursday. It was a Thursday morning, 5:30 in the morning flight. I printed out the job description. I'd never worked for a startup before. I wrote notes, along the way of, okay, I can do that. And I could do that, because even within CDW, do you think that most people were doing satellite communication stuff at CDW at that time? No. But I was able to find that niche and be entrepreneurial. And by the way, I had a great mentor there who gave me the bandwidth to be able to do some things that were outside of the normal. I felt like I had my own little business I was running within this broader organization. I couldn't have been as successful doing that without a mentor during that time at CDW. But I was writing down like, I don't have startup experience, but I was writing out everything. The only thing that I didn't have was I've never used G Suite email or apps. I literally, as I went through the day, I interviewed with, all of the CTO and the CMO and the VP of sales and, a peer interview, I think. And, by the end of the day, everyone was slowly like, we like her. I really like her. And then when Pat comes into the room and, I showed him like, I have all of this. I think I can do this job. I don't know. But I don't know anything about, Google applications. And I think at the end of that interview, especially after getting all the feedback from the people that had interviewed me throughout the day, they were like, you do have yes, you absolutely. And not only that, they were going to interview 8 people in Chicago the next week. They were going to fly out to Chicago. That was another one where it's the gumption. I knew they were going to do that. So that's why I flew out. I was like, actually, I'm free on Thursday. I think it was December 3rd. I remember. I don't know why. I can do that. I can fly out. Yeah. And I flew out and then I flew back on the right. But they offered me the job before I even left the office, having 8 people that they were going to hire the next week. But if I had waited, I would have just, again, been kind of part of that crowd. And also if I had second guessed myself anymore, I clearly wouldn't have shown up to that interview. But what's funny is, of course I was qualified for that. Did I work? Did I have the check mark? Did I, that I had worked for a startup before? No. Was I their top performing salesperson? Yes. So Pat Peterson taking a chance on me, every one of the people that interviewed me that day, taking a chance on me and saying, I say taking a chance, but really they didn't. They saw the value in the work that I had done to that point. So to answer your question, I think that way as well, is kind of reading between the lines on the people that are sitting across the desk from you when you're doing those interviews is, well, sure, she or he or they did not work at this exact company before, but that's why we're hiring them. We want them to bring this new perspective and this passion and the diversity, the diversity of their experience to the table for, that type of engagement. So yeah, I thought that was a really great question that you asked about the hiring piece, because I think that too often people look for that check mark. And by the way, before I got the job I got now, a large company that you've heard of didn't hire me because I didn't have a check mark from an HR perspective, managing people in the exact way that they wanted me to have managed those people. And I thought, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. But if that's the check mark you need, go ahead. But at the same time, I was thinking in the back of my mind, and this comes back to a little bit for me, it's, when we look at DEI issues, for me, it was a gender issue for me. Sure. When I was 29, were my peers who are not as good as me, who are not my gender, being promoted very quickly into management roles and managing people? Yes. So was there a shift in the industry where, so 10 years later, you're telling me that you can't hire me because I don't have this check mark? But would I be better than that person who just left another job managing people and left because they did it poorly? Would you'd rather hire them because they did that job already, but even if they did it poorly? I thought that was really interesting. And that happened to me within the last 2 years. So it still happens all the time. So I really, really appreciate you shedding light on really looking at the individual human being sitting across the desk from you and looking for whether or not they are a cultural fit and and have the same passion for your business that you do. But yeah, they absolutely don't always have to have every single check mark.
But if you don't have 15 years of Kubernetes experience, you can't work here.
Exactly. The blinders. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's like asking for 40 years of Sarbanes-Oxley.
Exactly. It's not physically possible, but I've seen it on Rex.
But you know what? Like, there could be a unicorn, the one that time travels. So.
And they should definitely be hired. Yes.
Right. Like, if you figured out time travel, then you should get every job.
But if I figured out time travel, 2022 is not the year I'm coming back to.
No.
That's another pod. Let's do that podcast. I want to do that one next.
Right. So one of the things that we talk about a little bit on MentorCore podcasts are well-being. Like, how do you find your own wellness? How do you work on that for the people that you work with? Like, what is your current plan, way that you look at this?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, and I think it's really timely. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, so I've entered. A lot of my LinkedIn feed, has a lot of really helpful tips. I practice mindfulness. I meditate at least once a day. I try to work out. I think the word "try" is ridiculous. It's kind of like hope. Hope is not a strategy. Try is not.
Well, then you clearly haven't been in information security.
Oh yeah, right. Hope is not strategy. So yeah, those things. That one was from a little nugget from Steve Bell, would say that all the time. Another one of my great mentors. Yeah, I think it's really important to take that 5 minutes. Like I said, I'm a single mom too, so I'm balancing all of the things for my children. Balancing a pretty stressful job, a job I love, obviously, but still stressful. I mean, there's a lot of responsibility. So I do think that, finding something that makes you whole and happy. For one of those other things for me is playing my guitar. I mentioned that clubhouse room I went into. I also played a little Ani DeFranco, a little 90s music, go back into your whatever space you need to be to feel like you've been able to take a mental break. And so it's different for everyone. I wish mine was more going for a run. That would be great. I would probably be in better shape. But for me, it's music, it's meditation, and it's taking the time to really look at my children and what they're doing. I mean, watching my son, my 9-year-old, play flag football, I love it. And I find a lot of just peace in that, watching my son, who's a junior in high school, play a lacrosse game. That to me, I just find so much joy. People ask what your hobbies are. I'm like, Ethan, Charlie, and Jackson.
Right.
Because I thoroughly enjoy watching them move through their life and the opportunities that I get to do that. And I'm really thankful for the companies that don't mind when I sign out at 4:00 to be able to go to my kids' football game on a Friday night. So those things I think are really important for all of us in this industry, and to remember, again, the individual that's working for you is a human being that needs that time out in their life, whatever it is. If someone needs to go to a yoga class in the middle of a Thursday and it doesn't interfere with their work, again, it's making sure that companies are being mindful about the needs of their employees as human beings. And I think that, it's very timely. I'm glad you asked that question, because I've appreciated a lot of the conversations that I've had with people recently, and various companies that are even taking, there's a company, I can't remember which one it is. It's a third-party management company, but I know their CEO via LinkedIn, but they do a mental health day for the company, just randomly once in a while. And I just think that it's amazing for a CEO to make that commitment to their company, to say, you deserve this and take it, and don't open your computer today, please, or you're in trouble. I think it's just so important to have that time, that separation from the job, because it can be very, very taxing, especially now that I'm on the practitioner side. I really get the what keeps you up at night scenario, because there are a lot of things that keep me up at night, and so I need that time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In this field, you've got to separate out, or it'll get the best of you. So thank you, Katie, for all these great insights. We're unfortunately at the end of our time already. And so I want to ask you the question we ask everybody that comes through. Tell me what the best advice you've ever received from a mentor is.
You know what? I mentioned it earlier, and I just have to reiterate, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. That for me is hard. I grew up in a little Illinois town, very polite, proper, I spent a ton of time with my grandmother. So of that generation, being uncomfortable, putting myself in positions like that professionally, goes against everything that I've ever been told about being sweet and quiet and not assertive and not bossy, and all these, things that unfortunately previous generations used those words, and they, it's possible they felt that way, even though they loved me a lot. But being raised with that background for me, when a mentor said to me, that their feedback to me was, just be more comfortable being uncomfortable, Katie, and you're going to be fine. And I took it and I ran with it, and it changed my life, really.
Wow.
I'm sorry, the survey says you've already used that answer. Please try again.
Well, no, I have one last one that's a little funnier.
Well, go for it. I was joking, but if you've got something else, go for it. I
have one last one. Yes, one of my, how do you eat an elephant?
With a fork.
One bite at a time. It's also super helpful, and it's funny. It's a funny one, but I do think about it a lot. So yeah, not only being comfortable, being uncomfortable, but understanding that things sometimes do take time, and to take them sequentially and in order, and to understand that it's not always a sprint, and it's a marathon, and this industry is constantly changing. You can't know everything on day one, and anyone who says that they do is ridiculous, because you don't know what just was released yesterday, and so for me, that's the other piece, is just the continual learning and understanding that if I don't know everything today, it doesn't mean that I can't achieve what I need to achieve for my company, my clients, etc.
Love it. Well, thank you for joining us, Katie. It's been great having you. You can find Katie on LinkedIn. Any other place that you like people to find you, Katie?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Katie Hanahan, and then also on Clubhouse every Wednesday night with you in the fireside chat. And there I'm at K Hanahan. I use my real name on Clubhouse. Some people don't, but feel free to follow me there for other cybersecurity rooms, cybersecurity related rooms, and other mental health awareness type rooms as well that relate to our industry.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you again on the next Mentor Core.